I will always look back to this occasion with fond memory because I now have had the opportunity to thank directly the men and women who have taken interest in the events that are taking place 6,000 miles away. These are the men and women who have made it possible for my comrades and I, both inside prison as well as in exile, to come back to their country to help to build a new South Africa. It is for this reason that we respect, admire, and above all, love you all. Thank you.
On behalf of the citizens of Glasgow, I am delighted to offer my congratulations on this, the 40th anniversary of Nelson Mandela being awarded the freedom of the city of Glasgow. We know the importance of that event and that awards to Mr Mandela because on his visit to Glasgow in 1993, he stated that while we were physically denied our freedom in the country of our birth, a city 6,000 miles away and as renowned as Glasgow, refused to accept the legitimacy of the apartheid system and declared us to be free. It is still a matter of great pride that Glasgow awarded Mr Mandela the freedom of the city in 1981 while he was still in prison, the first city to do so in the world.
Today, the 4th of August, is the 40th anniversary of Nelson Mandela being awarded the freedom of the city of Glasgow. Michael Kelly was the Lord Provost at that time and awarded the freedom of the city to Mandela. And I'm glad to see that Michael has joined me today to discuss that event 40 years ago. The freedom of the city being given to Mandela on that day, of course, couldn't be given to him because Nelson Mandela was still incarcerated in Robben Island, but it was accepted on his behalf by Dr. Alex Ekweme, the Vice President of Nigeria. Of course, apartheid was still in full bloom as they presented it, declaring it to be omnipotent and invincible. But of course, the world proved it to be very different from that. And after decades of struggle, the South African people overthrew apartheid and Mandela was released. But that day, on the 4th of August, 1981, when Glasgow was the first city in the world to give freedom to Nelson Mandela, was an auspicious day for Glasgow and indeed for the campaign for Mandela's freedom. So, Michael, could you tell us something about the background to the city of Glasgow deciding to award its freedom to Nelson Mandela?
Yes, the initiative in Glasgow started with the anti-apartheid movement here, and they came to the grassroots of the Labour Party and asked that something be done to publicise the cause and proposed the freedom of the city being given to them. The Labour benches knew an awful lot about Mandela. They were aware of his presence, obviously, but not the detail. And this invitation from anti-apartheid provoked people to look him up and to study what he'd done, to see whether he was worthy of awarding the freedom of the city. And of course, we quickly came to the conclusion that it was an outstanding cause, this, and that we could help him and the people of South Africa by giving him the freedom of the city. I should emphasise that this was a Labour Party initiative. There's a lot of people talking now as if Glasgow welcomed this with open arms. That was not the case. There was a lot of opposition in the general public and certainly from the media in Glasgow who were quite hostile to the City Council doing this. So one of the great effects of it, that doing it in the teeth of this opposition, meant that people were forced to listen to his story. And the greatest benefit there was in education, which when people found out about it, of course, they swung right behind the move. But that took time, that took months, maybe longer than that. So the Labour group deserves tremendous credit for actually going against the popular flow and doing this. If our decision needed any justification, it was on this day 40 years ago when every single Commonwealth country sent a representative to Glasgow to show support for this move. And that showed me in particular that the Glasgow view had been a very narrow one, that the world actually had taken up this cause. And it gave us great strength to see these people arriving one by one and congratulating the city for doing this. It was a very moving ceremony. Mandela wasn't there. I had decided that I should pick an African leader, and it was very fortunate that they were all in London for Prince Charles's wedding. So it was an easy move for them to come up to Glasgow. I had no real basis of thinking who to pick, but it seemed to be that Nigeria, as the most populous country in Africa, should be the one that accepted this and kept it in trust for Mandela until he was released. So by coincidence, again, this date was Ramadan that year, and the president of Nigeria, who was a Muslim, couldn't come to Glasgow. He sent the vice president, who represented him in London and in Glasgow, and by amazing chance, the vice president was a graduate of Strathclyde University. So he knew Glasgow, he knew the Glasgow people, he knew the city chambers. And he brought this huge delegation of about 50 or 60 people with him to show the support of Nigeria to Mandela. So it was very important, very moving, and it swayed the media in Glasgow. When they saw that kind of support, they realised that they were in the minority and the opposition began to die down. And we worked over the next couple of years to build this support. And by now, people were believing that it was their idea, and Glasgow took the cause to their heart.
Thanks very much, Michael. I remember the ceremony well because I attended it, as you'll remember, and it was a great ceremony. You mentioned the opposition, and we know that the Tory councillors didn't attend the ceremony and boycotted it. But he also had said about the anti-apartheid movement campaign. And I recall that your predecessor as Lord Provost, David Hodge, had actually held a lunch for the South African ambassador, the apartheid South African ambassador, of course. And we picketed the city chambers. A huge crowd came. But as you also say, the media weren't favourable to us. But I'm very pleased that the Labour group did take up the banner from the anti-apartheid movement and did award the freedom of the city to Mandela. And I think all Glaswegians then, certainly over the years, became very proud of that initiative that the city had taken. The ceremony itself, that very famous picture of you presenting the freedom to the Vice President of Nigeria, I think actually it was 16 High Commissioners from 16 Commonwealth countries who attended the ceremony. And as you say, therefore, didn't look as if Glasgow was in a minority, but actually was in a majority in terms of world opinion. So that day was very, very important, I think, in the campaign to release Mandela. On that day, you hosted a lunch after the ceremony, at which the Vice President and yourself spoke. Of course, you'd spoken at the ceremony and you quoted Mandela and his famous peroration at the end of his trial. Later in the afternoon, we held an anti-apartheid meeting, which I chaired, and you were there on the platform. And Ruth Mompati, the chief representative of the African National Congress, one of the speakers. And so it was quite a busy day. So I think the people of Glasgow ought to be very, not just Glasgow, but Scotland, and indeed wider than that, be very thankful to Glasgow and your role as Lord Provost in presenting the award to Mandela. But it didn't end there. You then went to the United Nations in New York and launched a worldwide mayor's petition for calling for the release of Mandela. Could you tell us something about that?
Yes, again, there was a coincidence there in that the chair of that committee was a Nigerian. And I think the links between the Vice President and him alerted him that I would be, as representing Glasgow, an important figure to go there. So there we were in the whole panoply and pomp of the UN that you're so used to seeing on the TV. And I had my little card, the brown card that everybody sees on television in the United States, and this said Lord Provost Glasgow. And I was asked to propose the motion that all the mayors throughout the world take up this message and do what they could in their cities in order to promote Mandela's cause.
Yeah, it was a great initiative, really. The United Nations, of course, had taken a good position calling on for the release of Mandela. And in fact, the petition that you launched was eventually signed by 2,264 mayors from around the world. So it was very effective. And it really put Glasgow in the map internationally in terms of the campaign to release Mandela. And of course, it went on from there with the renaming of the street to Nelson Mandela Place and so forth. Looking back, how do you see it now, 40 years on?
I see it as something quite historic and brave that Glasgow did. And I personally at that time felt the pressure of at some stage hoping it would go away, because it was going to cause a problem, a political problem. It was clearly going to be unpopular. But the more I looked at the background and researched it, I realised that this was a cause of humanity, and that Mandela really demanded by his life that we do something for him. So looking back on it, I feel that Mandela made us make the right historical decision, and I'm very proud that Glasgow actually did that, because we were on the right side of history. The other thought I have, of course, is that people have lauded Glasgow, given a great deal of praise to Glasgow, but we didn't do anything. Mandela did it. He was the one who stood up against the system. He was the one that went to jail. He was the one that was committed to hard labour. He was the one that turned down offer after offer because it wasn't giving him the freedom that his people demanded. So we feel really, in retrospect, very humble about it, and emphasise that we played a very, very small part. If it was a significant part, that is great. But basically, the honour and the glory and the credit goes entirely to Nelson Mandela.
Yes, I would agree with you there. Mandela, of course, was offered release by the Apartheid government if he renounced violence. And of course, one has to remember the African National Congress had only taken up the arms struggle after the Sharpeville massacre. They had been petitioning and appealing peacefully for decades. And of course, it was only very late after the Sharpeville massacre that they decided to take that step, because all other roads had been closed. And so later, when Mandela was offered release, but he had to renounce violence, as they put it, he said that he wouldn't accept release and get his freedom until the whole of the South African people got their freedom. Apartheid, as the United Nations described it, was a crime against humanity. So I agree with you there that Mandela was, I've often said, a leader among leaders, and he stood out in terms of his lifetime of struggle against apartheid. And you referred to Glasgow playing a significant role, but not anything in comparison to Mandela. And I would agree with that, I think we should be modest about the role we played. But it was, I think, significant in terms of bringing people into an understanding of apartheid in Britain, and not just in Glasgow, because other cities began to give their freedom to Nelson Mandela. Dundee, Aberdeen, Midlothian district in Scotland, other cities, Newcastle, Hull, the London Borough, Greenwich, Sheffield in England, and Islwyn in Wales gave the freedom of the city. And eventually, of course, Mandela came to Glasgow to, after his release, to collect the freedoms from these 9 cities. And that was a tremendous event when he came to Glasgow that day. Do you recall that event?
Well, yes, the specific thing I recall about that, which gave me great satisfaction, was that when I met him, I was able to ask him, no, we were doing this here, you were in jail. Did you have any idea what was going on? And he said, yes, there was a network. There was a way of getting messages into us. And when I heard that, that boosted my morale and the morale of my comrades there. So I was very satisfied that he actually did know at the time. And as he said, it made us realise that the world hadn't forgotten us. Because, of course, part of the imprisonment and the isolation is to convince the prisoner that he might as well abandon all hope because he's there and people have forgotten about him. So getting these constant messages of support kept them going. So there was a practical effect on the prisoners that came from Glasgow. And so that was my outstanding memory, apart from the fact that I've got a photograph taken with him and it's now on Facebook.
Yes, I remember that well. It was the Hilton Hotel because he was staying there the weekend, and I'd stayed the weekend in the hotel along with him. And it was quite an event, in fact, where he was meeting people and he made the thanks in his speech to all the people of Glasgow, you know, who had stood in solidarity with him while he was in prison. And these were people 6,000 miles away. And he then spoke in George Square, of course, in the torrential rain to thank the people again. So that was another great day. But I think looking back on these 40 years since the award of the freedom of the city to Nelson Mandela, as you say, it was an auspicious moment in Glasgow's history and played a modest but important part in the struggle for the freedom of the South African people and Nelson Mandela. So thank you very much, Michael, for joining me to discuss those events 40 years ago and for your role in them.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate you asking me to participate in this.
It is such an honour to be able to join you to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Glasgow awarding the freedom of the city to former President Nelson Mandela. These days, when we look back at the history of the anti-apartheid movement, one of the things that strikes me is the dedication, commitment, and absolute determination shown by the AAM to make sure that the memory of South Africa's unfortunate history, the apartheid history, was not forgotten, and to keep the legacy of their own involvement alive. I thank you and I applaud you for that. I thank you for the fact that you have raised so much money towards pushing up a statue of former President Nelson Mandela in Glasgow. The significance of this statue cannot be overstated. The links between the African National Congress, the Liberation Organization of South Africa, and the people of Glasgow through the AAM can also not be treated lightly. It is a relationship that has endured for decades, and a relationship that I know will continue well into the future. So congratulations once more. I hope the proceedings are the success that you expect them to be, and I look forward to seeing you on my next trip up north.
We are near our target to build the statue, and an education project with WASDEC is already underway. With your help, we can make the statue a reality. A people's statue that marks Scottish people's solidarity with a world-changing fight for equality 6,000 miles away. In these times, it has never been more important to keep our history of fighting inequality and racism alive for this generation and generations to come. You can be part of that. See us on Facebook and Twitter, pledge your support and donate at mandelascottishmemorial.org.